Hi everybody, welcome back to Law Hero. My name is Jen and I love making videos about the law because I am a sad nerd with no life during coronavirus. I'm only joking. This is my passion, this is my hobby, this is my be all and end all. I love learning myself, so it only makes sense that I would want to impart some of my learnings on you. Okay, so today, make sure you like and subscribe and all that. Okay, so today we are gonna look at white collar crime because it is an up and coming area in law, in that it is being legislated for more and more, but also for example, if you own company law, white collar crime can be an exception to the rule of a separate legal entity. To pierce the corporate veil, you may use the exception of illegal or fraudulent act, and these exceptions, these areas of law, white collar crime, which I'm going to describe to you today, might come under it. So for example, there's been some recent cases in South Africa to do with health and safety. I'll put them up here. They would be examples, and that would be persuasive jurisprudence in this jurisdiction for piercing of the corporate veil. So this is an example. We're just delving into it. We're going to look at three areas. So corporate manslaughter, for which there is no offence of corporate manslaughter in Ireland. There are in other jurisdictions, but in Ireland we tend to call it gross negligence. Manslaughter. We're going to look at health and safety offences because we've seen with a lot of construction related fatalities that has been used to pierce the corporate veil, and also environmental offences. They're usually strict liability in tort. So you kind of know all of this from your FE1 knowledge or from your undergrad knowledge already, but this all just kind of culminates together. So actually, interestingly enough, there was a corporate manslaughter bill in 2016, but it actually was never signed into law, and it actually created an indictable offence of corporate manslaughter by a company, which is very, very interesting. Obviously, in criminal law, we have voluntary and involuntary manslaughter, just like we have voluntary and involuntary intoxication, for example, and gross negligence manslaughter is an example of involuntary manslaughter. So basically, to prove it, you have to show that the defendant owed a duty of care. By objective standards, this standard was broken. The negligence that caused the death was of a high degree. The negligence involves a high degree of risk or likelihood of substantial or potential injury to others. It can also be omissions, and we've learned about that in criminal law before. The problem with negligence and specifically crime, as we know, is mens rea, which is an intention. And normally when we think of mens rea, we think of it as actually a person, and this is where the big problem around corporate manslaughter has come from, because as we know, companies are fictions, just like states are fictions, just like money is fiction, and companies are only as good as their managers. But at the same time, there would be disruption to commerce if people who managed construction companies, or people who are building roads and things, they're not going to be comfortable going into a job with that degree of risk where they could be held personally liable. So the question is, who bears the burden of the risk? Because if a company has committed the crime, that's fine. The company is liable. You use your insurance policy. But if it's shown that it's somebody acting acting negligently, or indeed omitting to act, that is a whole different kettle of fish, and that's why we have had such problems with corporate manslaughter. Okay, so that's that. Now we're moving on to the Safety, Health and Welfare at Work Act 2005, which is like the primary piece of Irish legislation for health and safety, for basically any health and safety offences in Ireland. You'll study about health and safety if you study employment law. You'll study it in tort a little bit. Yeah, but it is an area where corporates can, where companies can commit offences, because the offences are usually committed by employers, or people who are in control of the workplace. So for example, there's certain standards which employers need to meet to ensure that there's a safe workplace, that people are adequately trained, that they have the right equipment if they're dealing with dangerous scenarios, like they're cutting down trees, and they have hard helmets, all this stuff. That's all in legislation. So breaches would be, as I said, there's a lot of duties in there. So if they breach one of those duties, like they don't provide information, instruction, supervision to their employees, they don't put in the protections, the protocols to combat emergencies, they don't manage and conduct an undertaking in such a way as to ensure that the risks are reduced. So it's very, very broad duties. So the question is then, as an employer, so for example, like with COVID at the moment, a lot of employers are rolling out this health and safety training around ergonomics and how you sit at your desk, because you can obviously get back pain. Normally, if you're in, an employer who is fulfilling their health and safety duties, they will do like an ergonomic test with you. They'll make sure that you're comfortable at your desk, because they want to reduce the risk of you getting spinal discomfort or muscular tension, any of that. They want to show that they have fulfilled their health and safety obligations. A defence under the Act is that they have done everything reasonably practicable to exercise their duties as a reasonable employer. That means they have put all care into preventing any injury, and that it's proportionate in line with the risk. Finally, the last area we want to look at is offences relating to the environment. And we usually look at this when we look at tort, but this would be another area of white collar crime. If we look at, for example, pollution, so this is, and this is not just water, this would be considered food, or destroying land, or harming public health. That is all strict liability. You don't have to prove negligence, okay, for any of those. So that's like discharge, sewerage, killing fish, taking fish, which I didn't know was considered pollution. It's basically causing or permitting something in an environmental statute, and that's a strict liability offence. Can be a civil and criminal liability for those. Now, the defences, as we've already studied in tort, would be like your novus actus or your force majeure. So for example, if it was an act of God, or if it was something, for example, anything that breaks the link. So for example, like a flooding. So that's not you polluting because the flood happened and you couldn't control it, unless it wouldn't be an act of God if, for example, like Hurricane Charlie in the 80s, where there was no warning of what the fallout was going to be. If you knew that you were on a floodplain and you allowed your land to be flooded, that could be seen as pollution. Corporate manslaughter, which as we know doesn't exist here, it's gross negligence manslaughter, health and safety, and environmental offences, which would all come under the umbrella of white collar crime in a nutshell. It's not very detailed, it's just so you know what white collar crime is if you ever come across it. Yeah, I am done. Very much enjoyed making these videos for you guys. If you want more, please like and subscribe and let me know what you want. And thank you to the person who suggested this, and I'll see you in the next one.